Secret Lab's first ever Lab Report Live. We're lucky enough to be here at the Four Seasons in Hampshire, and my four fantastic guests are the General Manager himself, Andrew Harrison, Rakesh Joomuck, who is the Managing Director of Pearl, which is a DMC aggregation and promotions agency, and my good friends here from the Four Seasons Worldwide Sales Office, Nic Stott, our Account Director, and Lindsey Tomkins, who is the Regional Director of Sales. Good morning, one and all.
Morning.
With, it seems, and hopefully the world opening up on the back of various vaccination programs, we wanted to welcome you here and just have a discussion about what future travel might look like for the Four Seasons as a whole, but also with Rakesh's perspective, how that's going to look globally. But before we sort of open up that discussion, I wanted to sort of start with Andrew and just ask, how have the last 18 months been for an industry that to a certain extent doesn't have a pivot? You're either a hotel or you're not, and without people being able to come through the door. How has the last 18 months been?
Remarkably productive. We've had an opportunity to do things in the hotel that you can't normally do when the hotel is occupied. I've been here all the time. We've had a team working on the property, protecting it, working on it, engineering, security. There's been marketing people have been working as well in the background, finance. So there's been things happening here. We're very, very lucky, fortunate in this country to have had the furlough system, which has really helped us enormously. But as I said, we have done a lot of things in the hotel, and just prior to the first lockdown, we completed a full refurbishment of our event space, and it was open for about 2.5 weeks, and then we went to lockdown. So that was a bit of an anticlimax, but it's there. It's shiny still. And then, fortunately, in September, we got an agreement from our owners to do a full room refurbishment, and that has started in September all the way through till May 17th was our D-Day, so to speak. So again, doing that with an open hotel, which we would have done previously, has logistical issues, and you invariably you'll get a guest who notices there's a noise or something's missing or whatever. But now we've been able to do it all the way through. Also with Brexit. Brexit's been fun on getting stuff from abroad, but we've got through that, and we're ready, up and running, and got a very busy summer ahead of us.
Yeah, I mean, we briefly discussed it in our walk around this morning. How has it been in terms of bookings is concerned, sort of, the hotel sort of, coming back to life, as it were, in terms of having people through the door?
Very strong, predominantly from, it's UK based, predominantly for people coming out of London. To be able to get to 500 acres of Hampshire countryside within less than an hour from the centre of London is very, very lucky, and very practical. We've got a huge amount of activities, so it's great for the families. But we're seeing this other business starting to come through. And the other thing is weddings. We've got 55 weddings booked through till the end of the year, and they're still coming in. So a very, very busy marriage time.
That's all the people who've had to cancel more than once. Okay.
We've got one who's had to cancel 4 times.
Were they originally going to be here?
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, that's okay. So, I mean, in the position of that, I mean, I think just opening it up to you, Rakesh, from a global perspective, obviously there's this, not just from the wedding perspective, but there's a pent up, I think, desire to travel again. What do you think that's going to look like, just in terms of a top line, as the world starts to open up? What are we going to see in terms of the future of travel in terms of a post-pandemic world?
Well, there's definitely an urge to travel again, that's for sure, because as much as everyone has been in isolation and working remotely, and team hasn't been able to bond, together, we definitely seeing an increase in demand for people to start planning, to be ahead of the game, to start traveling again. So The later end of 2021 is looking quite prominent. So, and 2022 is incredibly busy to an extent. In some countries or venues, we are not finding the availability that we are looking for to be able to host an event. So it clearly shows that corporates and travelers are very eager to get out there, to reunite with colleagues, with families and friends. So that's for sure.
How are you sort of having to manage that desire to travel, obviously against an increased focus on risk versus reward? I had a brief discussion with Nic just before we began filming as concerns the nature of incentive. It's either an incentive trip that there isn't really an alternate. I mean, you can send people a Rolex, it's not the same. Bringing people together in a beautiful environment is quite a unique proposition. But how are you managing that against the fact that there's such a focus on how can we do it safely?
Well, there's a lot of risk assessment that we're having to do, and in terms of when clients come to us and looking at destinations wise, it's more about where can you travel, when can you travel, which are the destinations that's managed COVID better than the others. So there's all of that together before we kind of have a plan and ideas of where would we suggest, depends on if you're looking, clients asking us, okay, where can we go in September? So we kind of seeing that actually there's such and such countries opening up already that are going to be safe to travel, and also being on the green list that we have in the UK. So we're definitely kind of analysing every element of safety and where people can travel to make those recommendations to clients.
Yeah, and I think bringing you in, Lindsey, was really interesting. Obviously, working with the worldwide sales offices we do, to see you in your new sort of senior position at, not to put too fine upon it, potentially the worst time in the last 100 years to work in travel. We've definitely at least seen that. I think people who were, following on from what Rakesh said, were sort of looking at everything being a moving target as a reason not to think about travel. Now we're starting to see that cross that sort of that top of that bell curve of kind of concern, and people are like, let's put something in and deal with it as best we can, because even now, places that like Taiwan and stuff that have dealt with the pandemic well, suddenly there'll be a spike and everything changes. But even despite that complexity, people are now thinking, we do want to put something in. How's that going to look? In terms of your perspective, from your position, how has that last 18 months look from a top-down view?
Well, I mean, I think for everyone, it's been a year of ups and downs. I mean, much of the time you take 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And if anything, the year taught us is that we can't predict what's around the corner. You just had to pivot. And sometimes how people and companies react in the time of crisis, it just allows them to shine more. And I do think that we as a company have really come out of this stronger. We have developed the Lead with Care program, which is founded, in partnership with Johns Hopkins Medical Center, based, very science-based. And that's given, our customers the confidence and really the trust. And we're a brand built on trust, right? We need to create a safe environment so people do feel confident to come back. And that has helped in many of the markets that we're open in. And I do think it's important to say that we are open globally. So of 119 of our hotels in 47 countries, 90%, just under 90% are open, and we're ready to welcome clients back. It's just a matter of the travel corridors and of course the vaccine rollout to continue in the right direction.
Yeah, and from our perspective, and this is really to the two of you, that we've had a number of programs, globally that have had to be pushed back and pushed back and pushed back. And I think not only from a safety perspective, but from working with you, but then also with the resorts themselves, the ability or the desire to be like ridiculously flexible and to try to keep the programs alive and not, have the client incur any additional fees wherever possible has been a game changer in terms of keeping these programs alive and then building trust for further development. I mean, from your perspective, obviously this will have been a discussion you'll have had. From the internal, what was the mandate in terms of how are we going to deal with this? What is the kind of, our sort of head-on approach after you all had 24 hours to go, then everyone had to go back to work the next day, then what?
Yeah, so it was pretty much the game plan from the start was to, as you say, be as flexible as we can, keep hold of the programs that we've got booked in and events, and really try our best to accommodate those later in that year, which then turned out to be the following year, and now even 22 and potentially 23 as well. So it's the on-site teams have been great in relocating, rebooking many incentives, events, and as a result, as Lindsey mentioned, we had a high rebook percentage and have come out strong in the clients' minds and their clients as well to really put us in a strong position moving forwards.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't want to start a fight, but I did mention it to Andrew earlier, obviously, that there would be a UK-based hub on this side of the conversation and then a global hub on this side of the conversation. So we touched on it earlier, just in terms of the mix of people coming from the UK and people from overseas. I think we're finding that people are asking the question, what do you have for us that's a little bit closer? How's that working for you in terms of UK bookings versus rest of world?
I mean, it's working very well for us. Normally we get 70% of our business from the UK. Now we're predominantly, it's about 98% is coming out of the UK. And there's Brits and there's also foreign nationals who are based in the UK coming here as well. Just interesting, this morning I was dealing with a question. The UK government has come up with a quick 5-day quarantine for US citizens coming through if they want to opt to buy the PCR test. So they can get out within 5 days, assuming all tests are correct. And so that speeds up the process rather than 10 days. We don't take anyone in who do their quarantine in the hotel.
Right, okay.
So, yeah, so that's good news. And hopefully that's going to open up. There's more green corridors going to be announced. And so, yeah, that's very, very promising.
And opening it up to the global side of the room, are you finding that that's any kind of conversation, or people are sort of being, not cavalier, that's the wrong word to use, but they're like, give me the Maldives instead of Dubai? Or are people saying, have you got anything a little closer to us, take into consideration, especially for larger groups, the amount of time they have to spend in airports, on planes? Are you having these discussions, or is it still being led by the allure, the magic of the destination itself? Let's start with you, Lindsey.
It's definitely the lure of the destinations for sure. There is so much pent-up demand for travel, and our customers are very resilient. So as soon as a travel corridor opens, they're ready to go. And we saw that last year with the corridors with France and Greece. We also, our clients from Russia, for Maldives, for Seychelles, as soon as the corridors are available, they're there. And I do anticipate as soon as the UK has an increased number in the countries that are on the green list, then no doubt we'll see an increase in travel. But there is still so much demand for domestic, especially country houses. There's so much space, the feeling that you can get outside and the outdoors without being in crowded places. So I don't anticipate that to disappear anytime soon. I just think that people will travel regional first before they get on to long haul, probably later in the year 2022.
Well, we were expecting to see more short-haul European destinations being kind of like the trend, because it's closer to home. If anything happens, people can get back home quicker. But we've been pleasantly surprised, I would say, to see some inquiries coming in for long-haul destinations, with the likes of Mauritius being an island, and that has done pretty well during the pandemic, to even destinations like Dubai. We've even picked up a booking and confirmed for Australia for 2023. So we've seen those long-haul destinations coming, quite popular, as well as like a few European island destinations like the Greek islands, Cyprus, Malta, proving to be the destinations where people have been looking at booking for, the end of the year.
Is that predominantly for incentive trips?
A mix of incentives and conference as well, meetings.
Okay, taking that into account for this question for Andrew and for Nic, we'll start with Nic. If incentive can't be replaced because there's no virtual for sand in the toes and someone from the Four Seasons knowing your name, your kid's name, and knowing whether you do or do not like frozen watermelon versus frozen pineapple, what about the smaller meetings that potentially have now been Zoomified, where people would not consider coming? We've brought a couple of groups here over the years, 20 to 30 people. It's 1 night stay, it's 2 night stay. The effectiveness of that versus the cost will now be in P&L's hands. Procurement will be questioning, are we getting so much more value for X amount of money versus no cost at all? What discussions are you having about that in terms of, has that business gone away? Has it been dreadfully impacted? Are you seeing it coming back? Or is incentive leading only the charge?
Incentive is leading the charge. However, as we're talking about smaller meetings and events, we're definitely seeing in the short term domestic inquiries coming through a little bit heavier. Lisbon's been quite popular as well over the last couple of weeks for the short term. However, we're dealing with these in numerous different ways. Obviously, we can host them here in the UK now. We've introduced a phenomenal hybrid meetings program and events package.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So obviously across our portfolio, we can arrange hybrid meetings across various different countries and Four Seasons platforms, offering obviously the exceptional experience that you would expect, along with the food and drink and culinary experiences. Partnering with the best partners in each hotel as well to make it absolutely seamless and as live as possible, you could say, but obviously not everyone being in the same room. So it's been really successful for us this year and towards the end of last year. And yeah, it's adapting the way of a smaller meeting and a larger one as well. So whether it's a conference, a gala dinner, and award ceremony, we can manage that with our exceptional internal events teams.
I love how you went instantly back to corporate line there at the end. And for you, Andrew, here obviously maybe it's not your predominant focus in terms of the weddings and the transitory leisure and so on and so forth. But I mean, as I say, we've done that kind of meeting here, 20 to 30 people, 1 or 2 night stay, shooting, great food, spa. How has that looked in terms of its comeback?
I think you're not going to kill that. And I was just thinking back in the late 80s, I worked in a hotel fairly close by to the Four Seasons London, which was the Inn on the Park at the time. And we had a video conferencing, which was a thing of its kind, first thing of its kind in the UK at that period. And everyone thought, oh, that's the end of business travel and whatever. But at the end of the day, having that meeting with people together, bonding, is very, very important. I think in a group, there's only so much you can do by Zoom or Teams, and it's just one of those things that you get that connect, which isn't just a work connect. It's part of the core of a lot of organisations, and we've all been lacking that, like human touch, and it is something that I feel very strongly that definitely short haul, that's still going to happen. Long haul, the verdict's out, but I still think there are going to be people who are going to travel. People are definitely going to have a different view on how they travel and if they really need to travel, because I'm sure everyone can say that they that in certain places you're taking a plane like you take a bus, and the prices have been very, very reasonable. And now I think people are, the whole set with the environment as well is a very, very important element that people are going to be taking more into account.
How much, and I'm just going to lead this next question, it will be for Rakesh and Lindsey, but just before I lead on to that, in terms of the bookings that you'll get, how is it in first new inquiries, obviously as a result of what's happened over the last 18 months, versus kind of that core sort of Four Seasons business, which is return business, people who love an experience and they want to return again and again and again?
We are getting a lot of new inquiries, and it's good to see the other clients coming back as well. But I think they're also realizing, you know, we don't have to be in London, or we want to do something where there's a bit more intimacy, but you've also got that connection which is there. That okay, you could do in a hotel in a big city, but out in the countryside, as you said, there's other activities to do. You know, clay pigeon shooting, zip lining, you got spas, tennis, and so on and so forth, and that adds another twist to it. Yeah,
and I think, and I want to open this up. This is one of my favourite. I was doing actually unusually for me. I actually did some prep prior to this this video podcast, and one of the favourite phrases I read was, "We will always keep travelling because curiosity cannot be expunged." With that in mind, are you finding that people have either they want to play safe and return to places they've been to before, core places, Dubai, Mauritius, Seychelles, Maldives, or there has been a reset as concerns what travel means to people, the value of it, and not a doomsday experience of we don't know how long we'll be around, we should go somewhere we've never been before, but what is the desire to ask, you know, what does travel mean to us? You know, where can we go that's new and exciting, because each experience needs to be truly meaningful? Lindsey?
Well, I think part of Four Seasons, what we excel at best is creating unique experiences. And we do have beautiful buildings and fantastic architecture, but what people take away from that is not how the wallpaper looks or the furniture in the room, but it's how the team made you feel. It's knowing your children's name. It's knowing that you like frozen watermelon or frozen pineapple, and really creating these memorable experiences to take away, and you keep that forever. So we do see a lot of trends now with experience-based activities rather than just going to sit by a pool. And please don't get me wrong, that sitting by a pool has its place for sure. But people want to have, they want to get immersed in the local culture and see things that maybe traditionally that wouldn't have been available for them in the past. And I just think about going to Tanzania for the first time. And, it has to be one of the most moving travel experiences that I've ever had. And our hotel there does a fantastic job. Many conservation efforts. They will work hand in hand with the Maasai tribe. And it's those kind of moments that I can't stop talking about it. My kids know about it. I want to take them as soon as they're old enough to remember it. But it's just such a moving travel experience. And we create those moments so well in all of our destinations. I mean, some of my most memorable family experiences have actually been in Hampshire, and my kids still talk about, is it Dougal, the horse, the mini pony, and you can't, recreate those moments everywhere.
We went on a walk around this morning. Andrew was kind enough to take us around the outskirts of Pro, and I was able to remember the gentleman who had done one of our trips. He was the head of the shotgun experience, the clay pigeon shooting. His name was Brian, and I hadn't said his name for the 10 years since we'd done it. And it just popped into my head because I remembered how good he was with our group. And Bishop, our Secret Labs Director of Special Ops, who's just off camera over there, always says that the number one thing, I like to use the word absorb, really we should be using the word steal, that we steal from Four Seasons, is it's the small interactions that define the experience. The location is available to anyone with money, but the small interactions are defined by the soul of a Four Seasons employee, and that's quite a unique proposition. And that's something we've always tried to generate. In terms of how that represents in terms of location, what is people's language like post-pandemic? It can't just all be security-based. What's the feeling in terms of, as Lindsey sort of said, at the heart and soul of what is in a trip? What are people saying to you in terms of, what their expectation is from that travel?
Yeah, I mean, I personally am a true believer in experiential travel, and that's where, from a DMC point of view, that's where we come in, to be creative and to to come up with the ideas and experiences that people will always remember and cherish that special moment when you're traveling to destinations, even if it means that you have been to Mauritius, but creating that moment that you didn't get to experience before, but now providing new ideas and giving everyone that once in a lifetime experience, and that's what matters, and that's what will make people travel again, no matter where. Because if you look back, the world has had pandemic in the past, but the generation in the past have had to learn to adapt and to live with it and to find some form of new normal. And our generation will do the same. Give it a few years, people will be again very eager to go out there, no matter where, what destinations. But of course, it will always come back as in is it safe to go to Mauritius? But once you cross that border, once you cross that line, and you're there, that moment is priceless.
Yeah, and it's great as a segue that you used the word priceless, because I was going to come on to price, which is taking into regard what you can and cannot say, and I'm not trying to engineer you into a blind alley. How has the corporate response been to what would be necessarily the absorption of cost? Because a lot of people, there seems to be a wide raft of choice in terms of opinion about whether travel will become cheap as an incentive because it will have to get over the fear factor. But other people will say that it will become more expensive because it will have to, because there's so much more cost associated with providing, from a Four Seasons perspective, but also from many of your DMC's perspective, the top of the tree as concerns what that service looks like. What has been the mandate in terms of how is that going to work? We'll start, from the macro and give you the poison chalice.
You're basically saying that we have obviously taken on board costs for COVID.
So if a room was £400 a night, £500, £600 a night, but it now costs X amount more to provide the service associated with that room, what have the discussions been? How are we going to deal with that?
Well, those extra costs are not enormous. Let's face it. I mean, right. It's not huge. They're not going to be here forever. It's a cost that was taken on at the beginning of the end of the first lockdown. For us, we got a new hotel, so that's why my price has gone up, and it's supply and demand.
Yeah.
So
simple.
From
a global perspective, and we haven't seen it. In terms of our booking, we've actually seen the opposite, which is that everybody's tried to keep things very neutral, tried not to upset the apple cart, tried to keep things as friendly as possible, so that as you said, build on that sense of trust. From your perspective, how important has that been in terms of you being able to keep channels of communication?
Yeah, no, massively. I think going back to kind of the rebooked incentives and other events, we've really tried to keep the rate the same as we can with those ones that are already contracted. For new bookings, as Andrew said, supply and demand, it's really dependent on how open that destination is, how popular it is at the time, and that obviously, as in a normal world, would drive any kind of rate, whether it's an individual traveller or for an event.
Yeah, and we have seen it, is that we know, for example, from our past experiences, that sometimes the new date patterns that we've wanted, they're not on a kind of shoulder, which is more attractive for you in terms of pricing. And not only have they tried to hold the price, but tried to hold it when you know that the baseline price has gone up. So a huge amount of work has gone into the process from your side. In terms of, talking to Rakesh and Lindsey, in terms of people's desire to travel, how much of it has been price sensitive, or is it really, we just got to get out of here? As long as it doesn't go through the roof, we just want to travel. Start with you, Lindsey.
Sure, thanks. With any sort of travel, different groups have different budgets, different families have different budgets, and there hasn't been a change in that. From the corporate side of things, one trend that we have seen is maybe a reduction in the number of meetings that they're hosting in a year, but maybe that one meeting that they do have, they're looking at a bigger budget than what they would have. So we've seen exclusive uses become more popular, and Four Seasons operates small to mid-sized hotels, so we're set up very well to do small to mid-sized groups. So that's really been a great advantage for our teams because, we could offer 100 bedrooms and have the entire property to yourselves. From a family perspective, we've seen an increase in the number of guests that want larger spaces, so suites or even private retreats. So we have an extensive private retreats collection, over 750 available. So really allowing for that additional space and at-home feelings at several of our properties and locations. And that's certainly been a take-up that we see continuing to happen globally.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously have my Four Seasons bingo card, which I am slowly working my way through, just following Andrew basically around the globe and ticking them off one by one. And Maldives now has 4 offerings, not including the Explorer, including the one that is just basically the island to yourself. Please note, Nick, that is on my bingo card for a site visit at some point. Okay, so let's talk about, we touched on it this morning with Andrew in terms of the development of looking at it. If there are no silver linings to the horrendous nature of what's happened over the last 18 months, there might be at least some processes which were eased in terms of, like for you, the development of the hotel. One of them was the ability to look at how you could improve or integrate new technologies that in some cases might help from the sustainability point of view, but might also have been advanced just in terms of their integration to make selling easy. You mentioned, for example, the new hybrid program. Can any of you, and we'll start with you, Rakesh, from a sales point of view, how have you seen that? Let's say, for example, you would have probably gone to a large number of meetings, a lot of business done at large conventions and things of that nature. How has that been replaced? And how do you see that kind of, which in itself is quite a large market? What is the future of that?
Well, from my point of view, nothing can replace live events. As much as we have a number of our DMCs who's been investing on technology and partnering with suppliers who can deliver from the likes of hybrid events, but we foresee that this will just be probably for the next 18 months to 2 years, because the minute live is back, then we're not going to go back into virtual or hybrid. So from a DMC point of view, they have done the investment. They are working together with the best partners to provide, hybrid event and to be able to deliver, especially, when it comes to the global event that used to do the one big event, but now they're looking at doing multiple regional events at the same time. So that's where the DMC is coming in to kind of to be able to provide, and there's certain elements of each and every event being connected through a virtual audience, kind of bringing, although they're not all within the same room, but from different parts of the world, where the DMCs are working together with the virtual partner to be able to make it feel that it's one event, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And from your perspective, Lindsey, what's your kind of take on that kind of, if you look at the structure of incentive, large meetings and smaller ones, in terms of those large ones, I know you don't have sort of large conference centres in the portfolio, but for those larger meetings, we've done some, 300 with the group. What's been the kind of the sort of change as concerns that dynamic?
Well, there's certainly the group size overall in our hotels is in the small to mid-range size. I mean, we have some great flexibility in several of our destinations to have multiple properties, the UK collection being a great example of that. So if you do have a really large delegation, we do have the option to split them between, a city and a country experience, 2 properties in London, this beautiful resort in Hampshire. Also, we have multi-properties in San Francisco and New York. So we do have that flexibility to split groups if they needed to be in a city center. But then as Nick touched on hybrid meetings, And you know, this is new for us too, right? We're not technology experts, but recognize the importance of integrating that into our business because it's not going to go away. So we're just getting ready to host our first Hub and Spoke global event where we're bringing, which is still a new term for me to know as well. So we're bringing the group together in Four Seasons Park Lane, New York Downtown, and Four Seasons LA. This is typically an event that we bring everybody together. But the response from the different clients in the market has been incredible. You know, kind of we're leading by example, hosting our own events, Hub and Spoke. We're, you know, setting up this technology in our hotels for our clients to feel comfortable and confident that they can come to any of our hotels, and we're ready for them, regardless if that's a large conference or if it's a smaller version in multiple cities. I think it's new, it's exciting, but as Rakesh says, it's never going to take away the need for personal connection. We're just going to have to continue to pivot and see how things go.
From my perspective, I think we've seen it, and this is really my last kind of couple of questions, but probably just really one about coming out of this scenario. We've discussed a little bit, you know, that price is predominantly not, you know, the primary focus. Safety and security is that allure of the magic of travel, but also one of the number one things for us is the essence of sustainability. The last 18 months has unfortunately, potentially only now really placed a magnifying glass on, you know, never mind Greta being really quite upset about the nature of how things are turning out, but something that predominantly should have been a focus for many, and far be it from me to hold up, you know, Coldplay and Chris Martin as an example of anything, but there was a really interesting, you know, discussion with Chris Martin and Zane Lowe, where Zane was saying, look, I'd seen a piece that you'd said about when you were going to tour the new material, that you weren't going to do so until you could have made huge inroads into the sustainability of taking that kind of show around the world, all the fuel, all the people, and how you were going to do it. And one of the things that we've always loved partnering with the Four Seasons is, whether it's, you know, the expensive investment by investors on reverse osmosis machines to make their own water, to reduce plastics, especially in places like the Maldives, being first, you know, I can't remember what it was, but I'm pretty sure Langkawi had paper straws long before it was a discussion even anywhere else. So there's been a real sense of leadership. When you have the pressure of returning to, you know, business excellence in terms of a sales environment from one side versus how can we do that sustainably, you know, what examples can you give, you know, I think in specific cases where we have people come to us and say, we do want to travel, we want to do it safely, but sustainability is a huge part of what we expect from the package. You know, how can we integrate these potentially disparate elements and put them together in one package? And I know obviously you've been doing a large number of things of that nature here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, energy is one of the biggest topics. It's a very large expense as well, but I think there's ways we've become more efficient. Cogeneration, combined heat and power systems, CHPs. We have installed 2 massive units in the property. We actually make our own energy using gas, and then all the heat that is produced from that, as well as the electricity it makes, we conserve it. So if you had a normal system, you've got a 55% efficiency. With CHP, we're up to 87% efficiency. We're also looking at a new system whereby when there's downtime on those units, we can be busy heating up water and storing 5,000 litres of water up on the top of the hotel in a very well insulated tank, and then that gets used later during the day. So those are things that there's a return on them. It's a very viable thing to do, and it's a win-win all around. So, you know, we are always looking for different ideas as to what we can come up with. You know, there's the classics, the glass crushing in the loading dock, to the way you can reduce the volume of glass by about a sixth, to a sixth of what you initially started off with, just by crushing it. So makes transportation, recycling a lot easier. We've got an orchard with 220 trees that we planted. Trees help the environment, but also the nature as well. The butterflies. We've got bug hotels in our hotel, not in the hotel, in the grounds. But you know, we're very conscious of nature. We've just started seeing all the amount of skylarks that are in the hotel. It's a bird that has reduced in its by 20 years ago. It was very, very common to see them. Now their population is down by 10%. We have got a load in the fields here. We've stopped doing rolling of the fields so that they can actually live and their nests are in the ground. And I think it's being perceptive and seeing what's going on. I've got a gardener who pointed this out to us, and he says, "We've got a tractor with a roller on. We've got to stop it." Yeah, Dave. And so we stopped it, and then we started to find out what the deal was. And so I think there's a lot of ignorance around there. I think with a property like this, we can educate as well, and that is important. And going forward, Greta has a very good point.
Agreed.
But it's going to take everyone to knuckle down to that.
I mean, speaking to you, Rakesh, one of my favourite things that we've done, I mean, it's not particularly groundbreaking, we did it a few years ago, one of your key partners, Gulf Dunes, and with Andrew, was to not only replace all of the plastic water bottles that were had, and we calculated it was about, I think, 12,500 water bottles. That was if people had 5 water bottles, 500 mils per day, it was going to end up as 12,500 at the end of the conference. So we gave everyone a water bottle, and then working with the hotel, they put up the large sort of containers, and then we offset that, and then we showcased in the sort of keynote presentation of the VIP what that actually meant, and sort of filled like a swimming pool with plastic bottles, and said, look, just this small commitment by us, even though we've come here, means that we are conscious of our impact. What kind of discussions do you have ongoing about, because it's something that comes up consistently. I remember 10 years ago the number one was can I have an upgrade? Secondly, what's the Wi-Fi like? And now it's, where does the food, obviously pre-COVID, but where does the food from the buffet go when it's ended? People really start to think about the provenance of the food that they're going to eat, but also that there's no wastage, or there's less wastage, or that they want to have a great time, but not at the impact, globally or sustainably within the community. How is that discussion ongoing? Because people still want to travel, but not at the expense of the planet that we live on.
Corporate social responsibility has always been there, as you said. We always, research and find out in each and every country is different. But nowadays, every piece of business that's coming in, there is definitely an element of sustainability included within the program. Like you've rightly said about in the UAE, we're looking at replacing plastic bottles with reusable bottles. Some of the DMCs are working, whether it's to do with the environment, they're looking at planting a tree after every takeoff, or supporting local communities. So there's a lot of sustainable program that DMCs across the globe has been, putting together and reaching out to charities to see, what needs to be done, because every other company wants to give back. Having been, standstill for the last 18 months, and now that everyone is planning to travel again, everyone wants to give back. It's such an important topic at the moment on every project that we're working on.
And I'll wrap up with the last 2 questions for Lindsey and for Nic. For Lindsey, just taking on from that, one of my favourites is the kind of the reef regeneration programs. We spoke to Andrew, who obviously had personal connection there in terms of the mangroves in Langkawi. Do you have any sort of personal favourites or stories, such as the kind of sustainability, how it's an extension of how well the properties are always representative of the location they're in? Like, if you're in the Four Seasons Bali versus the Four Seasons Maldives, it's not cookie cutter.
No, it's about creating that sense of place, right? And one property that comes to mind is a new development that we're opening on Mexico's Pacific coast in Tamarindo, which will be open later this year. But it's a beautiful resort that is spread across 3,000 acres, but only 2% of the land is being developed. And they've had a botanist that's been taking care of the reserve for over 20 years, and it really is about preserving that experience with nature when you're on property, and being in the wild, and that being okay to not see anyone and just being surrounded by nature. But it's just an incredible job that that team has done on, you know, building this luxury experience, this once in a lifetime experience in nature. And it kind of brings us back to, you know, of why people are traveling. It is to have those unique experiences that you can't just get in any one place in the world.
So I'll give you the softball, the final one. Which are the hot destinations over the next 18 months, including any killer sort of Four Seasons openings? Where are we going to be going next?
I think, as Lindsey mentioned, a new opening Tamarindo is definitely on the cards. It's a completely unique incentive destination. Some really exciting openings in North America with New Orleans, Napa Valley as well. So looking forward to going and tasting some wine, hopefully with you, Cass.
I was going to say, more importantly, where are you and I going next?
And yeah, a bit closer to home, I think we need to try the golf course in Megève.
Yeah, I mean, wherever has a really great training facility is the first starting place to that experience. And that's it for the first Our Secret Lab Report Live. I'd like to say a huge thank you, especially to Andrew and all of the staff here at the Four Seasons in Hampshire. I'd like to thank Rakesh, Lindsey and Nick. I'd like to thank Lawrence, Andy, Jerry from Branch Out, who've been our audio-visual providers. And I'd like to thank Al, who is behind the camera now, and our Director of Special Ops, Bishop. And of course, although she does go on about being Kiwi's #1 photographic export, I'd also like to thank Fran for all her great photos. We look forward to this being the first of many. So thanks very much for staying tuned if you're still around, and we'll see you next time.